The story begins in Yokohama City, where an enormous kaiju suddenly appears, so the authorities sound the alarm, ordering the citizens to evacuate. It starts destroying the city, and everyone watches the news, as a helicopter starts blasting the monster, but it doesn't do anything, so everyone starts to get worried. But an elite unit known as the 3rd Division arrives to fight the kaiju, and their captain Mina fires her railgun, killing the kaiju with a single shot. Everyone celebrates the victory, thinking the 3rd Division is amazing because they were able to defeat the kaiju without any casualties. A team arrives to clean up the mess, and we meet a man named Kafka as he collects a sample for the researchers. He sees his teammates lifting one of the kaiju's organs, but he warns them to be careful, and it suddenly explodes. The blood burns one of his companions, so he helps the man, telling him he's going to be fine. Kafka realizes that the kaiju is massive, so it's going to take ages for them to remove it, and the supervisor orders him to remove the intestines. He doesn't want to do it because it's a disgusting task, but the supervisor tells him he has no choice, and his colleagues wish him luck, knowing the intestines are filled with the kaiju's poop. He throws up upon seeing the intestines, but he knows he needs to do his job, so he cuts through it anyway. Kafka returns home, but he can still smell the kaiju's poop, and he watches the news, realizing that everyone is praising Mina because she has defeated hundreds of kaiju at such a young age. We learn that she's his childhood friend, and he wanted to exterminate kaijus with her, but he's nowhere near her level, so he becomes depressed, wondering how he ended up in his position, but he decides not to think about it, knowing he's helping society by cleaning up the kaiju's remains. The next day, he reports to his office, where he meets his new coworker named Reno, but he says that he plans to join the defense force. Another man named Takuta tells him that Kafka used to have the same dream, but he gave up on it. So Reno thinks he's pathetic, asking him why he gave up, but he explains that he did his best, and he still wasn't accepted into the defense force. Reno doesn't want to end up like him, so he mentions that he will never give up, and he leaves the room, as Kafka realizes that he sounds like a loser. They return to the kaiju, and Reno is assigned to the intestines, so Kafka celebrates, thinking Reno is about to get what he deserves. But the supervisor tells Kafka to work with Reno, so he becomes upset, wondering why he always gets the dirtiest jobs. But the supervisor notes that he has grit, thinking he would have done well in the defense force if he passed the test. During their break, Kafka realizes that Reno has lost his appetite, so he gives him a vitamin pack, telling him to drink it so he doesn't pass out. Kafka adds that he needs to plug his nose, saying he needs to do it to survive, but he refuses, so he forces him to do it, and they start working together, as Kafka helps Reno with his job. Later that day, everyone prepares to go home, but Reno approaches Kafka, thanking him for his help. He can't believe Reno is doing this, and he tells Kafka that it's not too late to join the defense force, because they've raised the age limit for applicants. Reno knows he isn't happy with his life, because he looked sad when he talked about giving up, and Reno tells him to do whatever he wants. But he thanks Reno for giving him hope, realizing that Reno is a good person. But at that moment, a kaiju suddenly appears, and it's about to eat him, but Kafka grabs him, and they manage to survive. Kafka tells him to escape and call for reinforcements once he's safe, but he refuses to leave, so Kafka reminds him about his dream, saying he can't join the defense force if he doesn't survive. So he runs away, and Kafka calls the kaiju, so it starts chasing after him, trying to eat him, but he enters a building and jumps out a window. In a flashback, we see Mina crying, so Kafka approaches her, trying to cheer her up. She explains that she's sad because her cat died, and they stare at the ruins of their city, as they mention that they're going to join the defense force. But he thinks she doesn't have what it takes, and he tells her that he's going to become a better defense force officer, saying they will exterminate the kaijus together. But we return to the present, as the kaiju continues to pursue Kafka, who realizes that he can't escape, so he prepares to fight it. But it crushes his leg, and it's about to eat him. But Reno returns, and he wonders why Reno is doing this, so he explains that he'll never make it in the defense force if he can't even save his colleague. So Kafka realizes he's pathetic, knowing he can't protect anyone, so he doesn't have what it takes to enter the defense force. The kaiju is about to kill them, but a tiger suddenly stops it, as the soldiers open fire, and they blow it to pieces. Mina reports that the target has been destroyed, and she tells her men to follow her, saying they need to check if there are more kaiju in the area. That evening, We see Kafka in a hospital, realizing that Mina is amazing, and he thinks he'll never reach her level. But Reno knows that he wouldn't be alive if Kafka didn't save him, thinking Kafka is amazing, so he needs to consider joining the defense force. He thanks Reno for making him feel better, saying he has decided to apply to the defense force, but he suddenly sees a strange creature, which tells him that it's looking for him, and it suddenly dives into his mouth, causing him to struggle. Reno notices this, so he asks Kafka if he's okay, but Reno is shocked when he sees him. Kafka looks in the mirror, realizing he has turned into a monster, so they both panic, but Kafka explains that he still has control over his body, and another patient sees them, so he calls for help, and they know that Kafka is about to get hunted down, so they decide to run away. We cut to Mina, as she thinks about Kafka, who promised her that he's going to stay by her side, but she calls him a liar, because she's fighting the kaijus without him. She receives a call, and she learns that a kaiju has appeared in the hospital, so she promises to get rid of it. In a flashback, we see Mina laughing at Kafka, thinking he's corny for saying that he will protect her if she's ever scared. He starts to get embarrassed, but she actually thanks him and is happy that they will always be together. We see her gather her team, and she tells them about the situation at the hospital. There's an alert on the news, and the people are told to take shelter. We return to the hospital, and the old man is terrified, so Reno suggests clearing up the misunderstanding, telling Kafka to smile. But when he tries it, it just causes the man to faint. Kafka rushes to help him, but as he touches the wall, he blows it away, and they are shocked by his strength. The other patients wonder about the explosion, and Reno thinks they need to get away. Kafka goes to open the window, but he completely tears it away. He starts freaking out about his body, but Reno says they need to go, so they jump out the window. We see Mina's team on their way, and she receives a report about them leaving the hospital. Meanwhile, Reno wonders how Kafka turned into a kaiju, asking if he's really still the same guy. But Kafka says he doesn't know, as we see he has taken on a more monstrous form. His tongue suddenly launches out and grabs a bird, but Reno finds it disgusting. Kafka returns to his previous form, but notes there's another problem, saying he needs to pee. Reno tells him to hold it in, but Kafka isn't able to control himself, so Reno wonders where the pee will come from, and it comes out of his nipples. Kafka is embarrassed by this, but Reno says they need to keep moving. Kafka wonders if he can still join the defense force like this, but Reno thinks it's impossible, because he's become the thing that the force is defending against, thinking he'll be shot on sight. He becomes devastated realizing he will never join the defense force, thinking he won't be able to keep his promise with Mina. Reno notices a sealed-off area, thinking it's the perfect place to hide, but Kafka suddenly senses something approaching. We see an explosion, and there's a report of another kaiju, so Mina splits her team up. Reno notes that there will be less people after him, so he thinks it's the perfect distraction for them to hide, but Kafka seems to hesitate. At the sight of the explosion, we see a girl crying as her mother appears to be trapped. She isn't strong enough to lift the debris, and the kaiju suddenly appears. It smashes through the building and prepares to eat them, but Kafka suddenly punches it and completely blows it away, shocking himself with his own strength. He checks on the girl, but she's afraid, so he tries smiling again, but it only makes things worse. He's able to free the mother, but the kaiju suddenly returns. So he tells Reno to get away, and he charges up his full strength. He dodges the kaiju's attack, and delivers a devastating punch, which completely blows it up, causing its blood to rain down. He says it's over, but the girl is still terrified. So he tells her he will go, but as he starts to walk away, she actually thanks him. He's reminded of when Mina thanked him, remembering his promise to stick with her, so he realizes what he needs to do. Reno tells him they should go before anyone else arrives, but he says he's not giving up, saying he needs to go and stand by Mina's side. We see Mina as she arrives on the scene, wondering what happened. She asks the girl about the kaiju, but she's scared when she thinks about it. Mina assures her that they will wipe out all the kaiju, but the girl asks her not to hurt the good kaiju, mentioning how there was a good kaiju that saved her mother. 3 months later, we see the cleaning team watching the news, and learn that Kafka has been given the codename Number 8. Reno thinks things have gotten out of hand, and we learn Kafka was the first kaiju in history to escape the defense force, so they are all looking for him. The supervisor mentions there's mail for him and Kafka, and we see he passed the test for the defense force. He has a look at Kafka's letter, and we see that he also passed. Reno rushes to deliver the news to Kafka, but he sees him in his kaiju form, so he kicks him. Kafka quickly changes back, and Reno warns him he's still wanted, so he can't just expose himself. Reno gives him the letter, but wonders why he isn't excited, so Kafka mentions it's the second round that he normally fails. We learn that the second round is the practical exam, and Reno wonders how he'll hide his body since there will be officers watching. But Kafka says he will take it regardless, and since he's 32, this is his last chance to make it in. On the day of the exam, we see them arriving at the Defense Force's Tachikawa base. We see other participants arriving, and there's suddenly a girl that calls out to Kafka, calling him old. He freaks out and explains he's only 32, but she tells him his car is in the way. He notes that there are plenty of spots, but the girl mentions that 55 is her lucky number. Kafka thinks about teaching her some manners, but the girl decides to move it herself. She takes off her jacket, revealing a suit, and she lifts their car with only one hand, throwing it to the side. Kafka freaks out about the damage, and Reno wonders who the girl is, so she introduces herself as Kokoro Shinomiya, mentioning that her favorite hobby is killing kaiju, but she suddenly starts smelling Kafka, saying he smells like a kaiju. The story begins with an average salaryman who plays his favorite video game, but as he leaves his apartment, he suddenly suffers a heart attack and he ends up dying. He wakes up in a strange room where he's surprised to see a flying dog, and he realizes that he's been reincarnated into another world as a boy named Ars Luvent. He starts studying at a young age, realizing that he's living in the Summer Fourth Continent, which used to be divided into 7 kingdoms. But the Kingdom of Ansel united the land and established the Summer Fourth Empire. He learns about the existence of magic in that world, and realizes that he's a member of a noble family which rules a small region called Lamberg. He's happy that he has everything he needs, because the servants are looking after him, and he visits the barracks, where he watches the soldiers as they train. He sees a soldier named Melis struggling, so he uses his unique appraisal ability, which allows him to see Melis's stats. He learns that Melis has no talent with the spear, but he has potential as an archer, so Ars advises him to use a bow, but he refuses, saying only cowards fight from a distance, but Ars insists, so the soldiers tell him to give it a try. He reveals that he has never used a bow before, but Ars tells him to go for it, and he ends up hitting the target in his first attempt. The soldiers can't believe this, thinking he just got lucky, so they tell him to try again, but he keeps hitting the target with incredible precision. So they recognize his skills, thinking he will become an excellent archer, and they wonder how Ars learned about his talent. But Ars doesn't want to tell anyone about his ability, thinking they won't believe him, because he's the only one who can use it, so he tells them it was just his instinct. He starts thinking about his ability, as he looks at the mirror, trying to check his own stats, but he realizes that he can't, so he concludes that it only works on other people. While having dinner with his family, his father Raven is impressed that he was able to discover Melissa's talent. We learn that Raven used to be a commoner, but he rose to power because of his amazing combat skills, and Ars checks his stats, realizing that he's the greatest warrior in the land. He tells Ars to focus on his instincts, thinking it's going to be useful when he becomes the ruler, and he realizes that he needs to prepare for his future. So Ars starts studying about the Empire, but he realizes that the future is going to be chaotic because the rulers are corrupt and the peasants are revolting. He's afraid that the Empire is on the brink of war, so he needs to learn how to lead his forces in battle, but he knows that he lacks combat skills, so he isn't sure if he can protect his people. He thinks his ability might be able to help him, so he walks around the village, trying to look for the perfect soldier. But he realizes that everyone lacks talent, and he becomes exhausted because his ability strains his eyes. He suddenly sees a boy named Reitz as he gets kicked out of a shop, and everyone looks down on him because he's from an inferior race called the Mawkins. Ars gives him food, and he starts eating, as Ars checks his stats, and he's completely stunned because it's absolutely insane. Reitz is about to leave, but Ars follows him, inviting him to become his retainer, because Ars wants to gather the cream of the crop so that he can strengthen his army. Reitz doesn't believe him, thinking he wants to play a game, but he explains that he's a noble, showing Reitz the Leuven family crest, and telling him that he has immense potential. But he thinks he's going to cause trouble for Ars because everyone hates Mawkins, so he declines and he starts walking away. But Ars refuses to give up, telling Reitz that he can eat as much as he wants if he becomes a retainer, so he ends up changing his mind. They enter the Leuven mansion, where the servants give Ars his food, but they give Reitz a simple meal, thinking that's all he deserves. So Ars realizes that they hate Mawkins, thinking he can't talk them out of it, so he sits beside Reitz and shares his food with him. The servants are shocked by this behavior, but Ars tells them that Reitz is his honored guest, so they start treating him well, and Ars asks him what he was doing in the village. So he reveals that he used to work as a mercenary, but his companions died in battle, so he started wandering alone, and he ended up in the village. He explains that he tried to join the other mercenaries, but they shunned him because he was just a child, so they thought he wasn't a capable fighter. One of the servants interrupts them, saying it's time for Reitz to leave, but Ars explains that Reitz is going to become his retainer, so the servant absolutely loses it. Raven learns about this, so he calls Ars, telling him that a Malkin wouldn't make a good retainer, but he explains that Reitz has incredible potential, saying it would be a waste to let him go. But Raven doesn't believe this, reminding Ars that Mawkins are inferior beings, but he explains that he believes in Reitz's talent, telling Raven to test his abilities. Raven recalls that he was able to discover Melissa's talent, so he decides to give Reitz a chance, promising to hire him as a soldier if he passes the test. Ars is happy to hear this, but Raven explains that Reitz will have a mock duel with him, so Ars becomes nervous, telling him that Reitz is only 14, so he still hasn't reached his full potential. Ars checks their stats, and he realizes that it's not even close, but his father explains he will go easy on him, so Ars thinks he might stand a chance. They make their way to the barracks, but Reitz wonders why Ars wants him as a retainer, because he's being persecuted wherever he goes. But Ars explains that he needs Reitz's help, saying he's going to become the lord of the land, so he needs someone capable of leading his army. They reach the barracks, where Raven prepares to fight, ordering Reitz to take a sword, and he explains that Reitz will win if he manages to land a blow before the timer runs out. Raven charges in, and Reitz struggles to defend himself, as Raven continues to pressure him. Ars thinks he's in trouble, but the soldiers are impressed, because he's able to keep up with Raven, who has a reputation for crushing soldiers in an instant. He manages to land a hit, knocking Reitz down, and Raven tells him he's running out of time, but he refuses to give up, realizing that Ars is counting on him, so he decides to fight seriously. He charges at Raven, who tries to stop him, but the light blinds him, and he barely manages to block Reitz's attack. Everyone can't believe this, and Raven admits that he lost, because the attack grazed him, so he decides to hire Reitz as a soldier. Ars thanks his father for giving Reitz a chance, and Raven admits that he has talent, thinking he will become a great swordsman. Raven reveals that he was worried about his son's future, but he believes Ars is going to become a great man, because he has the power to recognize people's talents, and the soldiers praise Reitz, realizing he's an excellent fighter. After some time, we see Reitz wearing his uniform, as he accompanies Ars, who wonders why he's taking on servant duties, so he explains that he wants to help as much as he can. He reveals that he always dreamed of serving a lord, knowing he would have died if Ars didn't take him in, so he wants to spend the rest of his life serving him. After a few months, Reitz has been accepted by everyone, and he even receives tutoring, which further increases his ingenuity stat, making him one of the most knowledgeable people in the house. He gives Ars a lesson about the Summerforth Empire, mentioning how the Ansel Kingdom was able to conquer the other 6 kingdoms over 200 years ago, but the empire is now in a dire situation, because the current ruler Bydris is just a child, and his power is held by his retainers, who are involved in factional rivalries, causing the central authority to be corroded, leading to more revolts and governors that defy the crown. Ars thinks that the conflicts will only continue to grow, so he must prepare and gather the most talented people to his side. He wonders where the next conflict might be, and Reitz mentions their province of Missian, because the governor is old and in poor health, so there's a high chance he will die in the next few years. He has 2 sons, but hasn't decided on who will succeed him. They both seem to want the position, so there's likely to be a war. Ars wonders who his father would side with, and Reitz thinks it would be the older brother, since it's his right to succeed. But Reitz also notes that it's not up to Raven to decide, since he doesn't directly serve the governor. We learn that each province is divided up into districts, and Lamberg is part of the Canair district, which is within Missian, so Raven serves the head of Canair. Ars worries about what would happen if his father were on the losing side, but Reitz thinks this is their opportunity, because performing well during a major conflict can help a lord advance in the world, and Reitz thinks they need to recruit more people to get stronger. They head out, and they see Raven, as Ars notes he has been spending more time training, so he also knows that war is coming. Ars mentions they are headed to the town to find more recruits, and his father suggests finding someone who has the talent for magic, because magic would be invaluable in the battles to come. We see that Ars once tried to learn magic, but he quickly realized that he had no aptitude for it. They make it to the capital city in Canair, and Ars is amazed to see so many people. Reitz notes that there are around 50 times more people than Lamberg, and the Pyre House rules the district. Ars notices how everyone looks wealthy, wishing the people of Lamberg could also be like this, and Reitz thinks they will be able to find someone with potential since there are so many people. Ars starts looking around with his appraisal, but after some time, there's no one that has caught his eye. They decide to keep looking, but Ars notices an alley where all the homeless are gathered. Ars wants to help them, but Reitz thinks there's nothing they can do in their current position. Ars thinks about how he thought the town was amazing, but thinks he wants to create a place where even those who are less fortunate can make a life for themselves, and Reitz is glad to be serving him. They reach the market, and Ars is amazed looking at all the different foods. A man offers to sell him a dragon egg, and Ars immediately imagines having a dragon as a pet. He decides to buy 3 of them, but Reitz suddenly points his blade at the man, accusing him of being a scammer. The man says he's legit, but Reitz knows that trade with the northern continent was frozen, so it's impossible for him to have dragon eggs. He prepares to end the man for his lies, but Ars holds him back, as the people start to stare at them. Reitz apologizes for his outburst, but Ars thanks him for looking out for him. They have a break for lunch, and Ars notices a candy stall, so he rushes over to try it, but he suddenly gets bumped into, and he realizes he was robbed. Reitz goes after them, and he manages to grab their cloak, revealing them to be a girl. She turns a corner, but she's surrounded by some thugs who start beating her. Ars tells them to stop, and one of the men attack him, but Reitz stops him, taking him out with a single punch. He easily deals with the other 2 men, and they all stumble away, saying it's not over. Ars checks on the girl, but he's amazed when he sees her stats. He learns her name is Charlotte, and he sees that she has S-tier aptitude for magic, as well as insanely high stats for leadership and prowess. Reitz asks for Ars's coin pouch back, but Ars suddenly asks her to be his retainer. Reitz thinks she's just a thief, but Ars mentions her talent for magic, and Charlotte refuses to serve a child like him, saying she has never even used magic before. Ars becomes desperate to convince her, thinking she's stealing because she has a hard life, so he mentions how he will give her food and a salary, but she just thinks he's a spoiled rich noble. She thinks he doesn't deserve his privilege, thinking he was just lucky to be born a noble. She refuses to become a tool for him, but Ars swears he's different, mentioning how he wants to someday create a place where everyone has an opportunity, but Charlotte mentions how they can't wait for someday to come, because every day is a struggle for them. Reitz understands her, but still demands for her to return the coin pouch. Charlotte gives it back since they saved her, and Ars asks her about the men, so she explains they were the men of a slave trader. She was caught stealing from a noble, so she was sold off as a slave. She managed to escape from the slave trader, but they then sent the men after her. Ars wonders why she stayed in the town after escaping, but we see a bunch of children that rush up to her, and she explains how she couldn't just leave them behind. Ars agrees not to recruit her, but he decides to give her his money anyway. At night, Ars continues to think about her, and Reitz notes how he was in a similar situation as her, so he understands how she feels. He thinks she must have been treated terribly by nobles in the past, and she must see everyone as an enemy, but he tells Ars he's different. He thinks about the flaw behind his plan to create a better place, but at that moment, they hear the kids from earlier calling for Charlotte. Ars rushes down and asks them what's going on, so they tell him that Charlotte was taken, but that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.